what you're seeing here is not a limbic. It is not a skeletal mesh. This is not FBX. It is an ozone asset being driven by the ozone deformers live inside of Unreal, right? This is playing live in Engine, right? Everything you're seeing here, it's D. I can set the values, increase the resolution. This is all live, right?
That's sick, man.
Yeah, right. And when I mean live, I mean it's live.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Today I have a special guest with me. I have Rich Hurrey on from Ozone Story Tech. He's also a former character TD from Pixar Animation Studios. And I'm really excited to have him on the show. Ozone, if you haven't checked it out, I feel like it's going to be a game changer in the world of character rigging and character animation. So I'm really excited to dive in and kind of go full tilt with Rich here today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And I also feel that Ozone is a game changer, but I'm a little biased.
Yeah. So maybe to start out, I would love to hear, before we get into really what Ozone is, maybe how you arrived there. Like, what was your path from being a character TD to saying, hey, I see something lacking in the industry. I have an idea. And like, how that all work out? I love hearing those types of stories.
Sure. Well, we need to use the Wayback Machine. So I'll give a short history of my career path. So it was 1994. So that means 30 years ago that I was in Orlando and I discovered computer graphics in a real way. Was with the video toaster and Lightwave. And that was the first time I went to a SIGGRAPH was 94. So I got really excited about computer graphics, though I didn't know what rigging was at the time. And in that point in the 90s, you just had to know how to turn the software on and move something and you could get a job. So It was a fairly easy, it was much easier to get in especially with the wave of, that was after Softimage got bought by Microsoft and the migration from SGI was happening. So it was an interesting time. Honestly, I feel like the 90s feels a lot like where we are now with figuring out where the future is going to be and everything. In that time, everybody wasn't sure who was going to win and what was going to win and everything. So anyway, I started a company, ran that for about 5 years, got married, and I was like, all right, I want to make movies. So I moved to California. I got a job teaching people about computer graphics. And my whole goal was I was going to be exposed to film studios. And this was my in. I was like, well, if I teach people how to use something, then I can show my skills and then get into the movie business. And that worked out. I ended up working on the Matrix sequels at ESC.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sets modeler. That is where I discovered rigging. So I got to see the Sentinels being rigged, the mechs from that were in Zion. And it was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I'd always kind of been involved in organizing things and putting things together and things like that. But when I discovered rigging, character rigging was an actual job, I was like, cool, this is what I want to do. So I kind of dove in and taught myself. And really, I'm self-taught across the board. At that point, there was no schools you could go to.
No YouTube either.
Yeah, I mean, it was really early times. So I kind of dove into that. And that's when I really dug into Maya for the first time, to kind of get my head wrapped around rigging. Not that you couldn't rig in Lightwave / Moto at the time. And there's some history there that we'll push forward to as we get into things. And then I had a friend that worked at Pixar, Jason Bickerstaff, and I got a tour of Pixar. And so that, after that point, I was like, okay, this is where I want to work. Not only what do I want to do, this is where I want to work. So I really kind of doubled my efforts into that. And then I got offered a job down at Rhythm and Hues as a character artist. And there was people I met at ESC that got me down there to do an interview. Some of the people there, Joe Misevich, Will Telford, these are really high powered rigging guys now. And they're still friends. But we went down there, and then about a year into it, because I talked to Jason, I was like, hey, I really want to work at Pixar, but I'm being offered this job down there. And he's like, well, we're not hiring at Pixar. I'm like, okay, well, so I moved my then pregnant wife with our second child down to LA because we were in the Bay Area. And 7 months into my tenure at Rhythm and Hues, Jason goes, so we are hiring character artists now. I'm like, dude, I just moved my whole family down. Right. So, then, I applied and, I spent a total of 14 months down in LA because I got the job at Pixar and moved my family back up. And then I spent 13 years at Pixar. So I'm so giving you kind of the story. And there is when, I really learned like rigging as an art, right? And in Rhythm and Hues, it was also a crash course in thinking differently and how to solve problems and rigging problems differently. And I loved my time down there. It was go to Pixar and it sort of took it to a next level personally, like learning the art of rigging. Also, just really pushing me skills wise. And then when I left, it was late 2018. And I was like, all right, what am I going to do now? And I really wanted to teach people, right? So I had done a rigging course for the moto community prior to that, and I loved it. But I was kind of constrained with what I could teach because I couldn't sit in there and talk about what we were doing at Pixar while I was at Pixar. And so when I left, I said, hey, I want to teach people. I want to start a company and teach people. And I was talking to a very good friend of mine, Peter McGowan, who is the president and owner of Storyland Studios, which is a big company down in Southern California. They do themed attractions and they do design and everything else. And more importantly, they were really good people. And so as I was walking through leaving Pixar, and he and I were friends, and I said I wanted to do this, he goes, well, why don't we do that together? And I'm like, okay. So we started a company called Kitestring. And that is where I said, all right, I'm going to dig in and I'm going to teach people how to think differently about characters. That was my passion. It was like, all right, well, how do I help rigging artists think about this problem differently? Because with Rhythm and Hues and Pixar, and again, I worked in Maya, but I also rigged in Moto. Like I've said, an interesting exposure, if you will, to different ways, different thought experiments, different ways of looking at the rigging problem. I was like, all right, I think I have something valuable to people who want to rig. Well, we did that, and I built a body of work, and it didn't sell that well. To be blunt, it's like, so I created this body of work that I thought was transformative because the ideas are, but what I discovered is that if I couldn't give people a way to actually do things differently, it wasn't going to be of much value. So Ozone got its start right there, which was like, all right, I wonder if I can bring this different way of looking at the rigging problem and I could bring it into real time, because I'm seeing that games are a big market and you're seeing this collision of traditional production and game technologies, right? Kind of melding together. The Mandalorian was starting to be a thing, like all this virtual production idea. And so we spun up a test and we said, okay, let's see if we can do this. And lo and behold, we were able to get something to run in real time that was performant. And it was like, okay, this could be an absolute game changing piece of technology for the games market. And so we pivoted at that point. And that's when Kitestring became focused on building Ozone. And then about 2 years ago, we took investment so that we could move quicker. And that's when all that technology came out of the Kitestring company and became Ozone Story. So I'm giving you a kind of a long version
of the
story,
man.
Right?
I
so
love that.
It's like, but all along I have had a passion for teaching and a passion for learning and bringing and paying this stuff forward. So what we're doing with Ozone right now is building the technology, which I can show you some stuff today. But really what I want to do is, and what our main mission with Ozone is create a place for artists that don't have a Pixar budget, that don't have an R&D department, that don't have 30 years rigging experience, though I guess technically it's 15 years for me. But the idea being that we can give this not only the technology, but the rigs and all of the experience on how to use and build these things so that others can build Pixar quality characters, Rhythm and Hues quality characters, ESC quality characters, like feature film quality characters. And now that same technique can be used for your game environment. Now it's like you rig your character once. That's kind of, one of the big selling points for Ozone is create your character once and you can animate it wherever you want. And so now it's true character interchange and with no limit to the kinds of performances that you can create. and not having to have the same background and experience to get the same quality. So, and it doesn't mean we aren't going to teach people how to do it themselves, because that's all part of the plan too, right? But if you can grab a human rig, a face rig, and if you learn it, you can create a DreamWorks, Pixar, Blue Sky, may it rest in peace, illumination type character. Well, then that's the first step in learning how to build that stuff yourself. And a small studio can just take these tools and start immediately building amazing characters, right? So it's funny, we've pivoted a bit on how we message this, because I give a demo to a rigging artist. They instantly get the value proposition.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But now we're
super
trying to
excited.
engage. Yeah. But now we're starting to message to the animators and go, typically there's 10 animators to every one rigging artist in the world. And that it's really about, you have this level of control available to you, that you've never had before, or is very, very painful to achieve. So the value proposition is because it's symbiotic, right? Rigging and animation, you're two sides of the same coin. So anyway, I'm rambling, but that's how it all got started. We can get into the actual tech and stuff later, but that's we want to give the world the ability to build characters at this level, so that you don't have to have the same infrastructure to achieve it.
One thing I find exciting is that you mentioned, having this kind of exposure to different thought processes for rigging. So you weren't just brought up in this Maya rigging bubble, where I kind of, personally myself have kind of been in that bubble for the past 24 years. And you get really good at problem solving within that bubble, but you haven't, you do a lot of things a certain way, but you don't really understand, there could be a better way, or you're just kind of stuck in the Maya way of doing things. So kind of having this, stepping outside of that and just being able to, see how other studios from the ground up solve certain problems without restricting yourself to that Maya bubble, allowed you to really build something that I think is really cool. So I guess
that is something that we actually fight against quite a bit.
Is it?
Yeah. And I mean that not as it's not contentious, but it's like you go in, we give a demo to a studio, and the questions we get are very, we call it myopic, M-A-Y-A.
Yeah.
It's myopic, right? Where it's like, you don't know how to think about the problem differently. And so we're like, no, you don't have to worry about 100 corrective shapes on your face anymore. What do you mean? You're like, that's not how you solve the problem. You solve the problem differently. And right. So, it's an interesting thing. It's sort of like fighting against muscle memory.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so when you're myopic, you don't know how to solve problems in different ways. Now I would say anybody that's a rigging artist that's worth their salt, and there's a lot of us out there, know how to problem solve, right? To do that job, you have to be a problem solver. So once you can get the eyes open, I've seen great growth in I can look at this in a different way and solve problems. So
that's really cool. I like watching different engineering channels and things like that. And there's this guy, his name is Jeremy Fielding, and he has a great channel. He was talking about, if you're developing a new product or a new, solution to something, let's say, you want to involve a better lawnmower or a better grass cutter or whatever. You don't think of it as how can I improve the current lawnmower? You think of it how can I change the height of the grass from, here to one inch less? What's the most effective way to do that, instead of focusing on, well, we got this lawnmower, this is how it works. How do we, work around its limitations? And that's kind of exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. It's funny. The analogy I always use is, an internal combustion engine versus an electric motor, right? Ultimately you've got something that over 100 years, you've refined it down to the limits of physics, and it doesn't mean you necessarily pick one over the other, but you look at that's it, when you're thinking that way, that's how you solve your problem. Well, if I add an extra cam, do I get this? So people are optimizing for this way, where you go, well, I just want to push, to your point about the grass light, I just want to push a car. Well, right. I can use something the size of a watermelon that gives me the same power as this giant engine is more efficient. Now there's other trade-offs to that, but it's a different way of solving the same problem. And when you start thinking about it in a different way, you approach the problems you encounter in a different way. And it's the same thing. It's like, how do I make a better way of moving the car down the road? How do I get the blades of grass to the right height?
Right.
And then go from it that way. It's yeah, man. It's exactly you hit the nail absolutely on the head. It's your experience allows you to look at the problem, the fishbowl you're in, and how do you solve it within that, and how do you make that better? But if you can take a step back, and I've been fortunate, Rhythm and Hues built their own rigging software. Pixar built their own rigging software. And so cool. You've got to see them with an unconstrained, like an empty space, and blank canvas, where that's not what most certainly students, they go, all right, this is what I have to learn because this is what I'm going to need to learn to get a job. And totally reasonable. I get it. Mm-hmm. But, you go to a place like, even, DreamWorks, they're going to unwind your Maya knowledge so that you can learn Primo. You're going to unwind and learn their way of solving it. So while you have to show that you can rig, right, and you understand shapes and motion to get the job, once you're there, you're going to learn. They're going to make you learn their system.
Sure.
But in the outside world, that's just it's not possible, right? And when you deal with an open market where you go, hey, if I don't use this tool, how do I get artists to help me get my job done from a studio's perspective? And I think places like Epic are making strides. They're trying really hard.
Totally.
Side Effects is trying really hard with Houdini. So I mean, you're seeing companies try to crack the nut. If I had to bet right now, I think Epic's in the driver's seat for providing a separate, like another solution. If I had to make that, if you held me to the coals and I had to make a bet, that's what I would do right now. But it's like they're not the only player in the space. But honestly, if you want animators to animate and you want to solve your problem, right now Maya's still king of the hill.
Sure.
So it's not in your best interest to change that. From as a studio owner, you go, I want to make movies, so I need to put the tools in place that the people know that I can hire, right? And that presents a challenge to us too, right? How do you break into a market? It's part of the reason we designed, which I'll show you here in a bit, like why we did the things we did and the way we did it, right? To make it so we could become an option for these pipelines,
Yeah, it seems like from the little bit of what I know of what you guys have built, it is ported to Maya, it's ported to Unreal. It's kind of agnostic to the platform. Is that somewhat true? Or
yeah, and I can say when we get into demo land, I can show you. But so as a business owner, and I'm not the only owner. Peter McGowan's the primary owner, and I'm one of the owners. But as in charge of building what we're building, the goal was, how do we make it as easy as possible for the existing pipelines to take advantage of us, with this understanding that people are trying to, right now, they want to animate in Maya and they want to render in Unreal. And so we picked those two platforms as the starting point of what we're going to focus on for exactly that reason. There's how do I help people solve problems right now, but also in a way that they can actually use us? And then we look at the future of where we're going. And when, the 800-pound gorilla AI in the room, how do you create tools that take advantage of all this innovation in a way that still allows character artists to do their jobs effectively? But you got to start with right now. How do I make your job as a character artist work easier? How do I create a platform and a tool and a system that gives you the ability to produce characters faster at a higher quality and save your studio money? Like, you have to start with the right now practically. And part of that was, we have to be in Maya and we have to be in Unreal.
It makes total sense. Even like as cool as the stuff in Unreal for character rigging is getting, you can't reproduce that in Maya and have a one-to-one, what you see is what you get back and forth. So, and that, the production framework within Unreal isn't quite there yet, I feel like. So a lot of studios still have to rely on Maya to animate and do different things.
I fully believe that what they're chasing, they will achieve. That
for sure.
Epic will create a world-class production animation system inside their tool.
They're definitely doing it.
It will be different than what Maya is.
Sure.
And they have self-constrained that, and I mean this not a negative, just they're a game engine first.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they want is something that's going to always run at 60 frames a second, that everything that they're doing there will work in any game they build. I think that's an absolute, I mean, I get it. But when we're talking to the Sonys, when we're talking to the Real FXs, when we're talking to these other studios, that isn't as important as, can I hit the shape that my director wants? Can I hit the look? So, and eventually I think these things are going to collide, right? You're going to be, oh, now everything that I can build, we'll run in real time with no compromise. I think that is a future we're heading toward. I 100% believe it. But we aren't there yet, right? So I feel like we're a gateway right now for that. That you say, look, I can bring it down into the game engine, and I will get, we have a full version of a full character with, 900 deformers, and we're getting like between 45 and 60 frames a second depending on the hardware. It's great. It's running really, really well. But that 45, and let's say we put 5 of them in the scene and we're getting 24 frames a second, right? Because we are doing a lot of work to get these shapes. That's a problem for Epic. That's a problem for them because they want to have those fire characters running 60. So there are compromises that they have to make to enable that. Again, I expect these compromises to go away over time. But right now, as far as a studio is concerned, if I can give an animator 24 frames a second with 5 characters,
they're flipping out.
That's a dream, right? So I really feel like that's our biggest advantage isn't the right word, just what we provide. Our greatest value is that the high end doesn't have to compromise. They're going to get faster, better characters, and they can take advantage of these game engines. And as we get better, as we refine our tool, we're going to hit that 60 for everything as well too. So, and from a purely selfish point of view, we are agnostic as much as, I think we have a very strong relationship with the Epic guys, and I love them. And we are going to be great first-class citizens in that environment. We're also going to be a great first-class citizen inside of Maya. And we'll be eventually inside of Houdini and Unity and Godot and everywhere else. True interchange. Build your character once and animate it anywhere. And I think from a studio's perspective, that value proposition is incredibly strong.
Huge. That's really huge.
That means you don't have to think about it. You're going to build your Ozone character. You're going to get all the art direction that you need. Animators are going to be happy. And then if you decide like something has some crazy new technology that you want to take advantage of, if we're a first-class citizen in that environment, you just bring your character in and you start going. And that's, we can, there's philosophy.
I love it.
But like that's one of our mission statements, right? Is give the rigging artist the ability to rig something one time.
That's so cool. Well, I'm sure people listening to this are just dying to see what it is we're talking about. So let's jump in, man.
All right. Well, I'd actually love to show you the Ozone stuff. So here, what I'm going to do is I will give you kind of our standard Ozone demo. I will treat it like you're a studio that's interested in our product, and I'll walk through it. And like I tell studios, feel free to ask questions. And I think from a podcast perspective, you should, like, if you have a question, stop me and we'll get into it. And and I'll walk through where we are and what we're doing and where we're going.
Perfect.
So, all right, let me start the screen share and we'll jam. Here we are in Unreal, and I'll just hit play here. So I always start our demo with this character. So this is Zoe, a little test character of ours. And at its core, what Ozone is an execution engine that lives as a plugin inside of these environments natively. So what you're seeing here is not a Limbic. It is not a skeletal mesh. This is not a FBX. It is an Ozone asset being driven by the Ozone deformers live inside of Unreal. And another point of note is this face rig you're seeing here, there is not a single joint or blend shape in it. So it's a different way of solving the problem.
That's crazy.
Right? Now, because we control this completely, we were able to bring real-time subdivs into Engine. So what this means is that now our rigging artists, and let's go in here, zoom in, right? Right. Now you can use the sparse cage workflow that we've used for years in film and TV and bring that into games. So now rigging artists are going to deal with this many points, right? select it, but you can render this many points. And it executes at the microsecond level. So they're absolutely free from an execution standpoint. You can now deal with the low res cage and get a high res render in engine, and you don't have to pay the penalty for all these points carrying them around. So this means true like resolution independence. We were talking about electric cars earlier.
Sure.
Or like you're getting all of the smoothness you'd expect in an offline renderer, but you're getting it in engine and not have to pay the price for it. Right?
That is badass. Quick question, Rich.
Absolutely.
How are you driving your rig? Are you using the control rig or some kind of puppet system within Unreal, or?
No, actually, and this is great. You're queuing up the next part of the demo. What we're actually using here is an animated a Ozone clip. It's an animation file, but you can use control rig, so you have a choice. Well, here,
I see. Okay.
Yeah, no, this is great. So you're queuing up the next demo. So that the character you saw there was animated in Maya, and so is this little guy, right? So traditionally, if you were going to bring a character in, right, you're going to either come in through a skeletal mesh, the FBX, or you're going to bring in an Alembic. Alembic being the most painful of those two. But the idea is you use an Alembic when you have more than your standard joints and blend shape based deformers, right? If you want to use any kind of interesting other types of deformers in Maya to bring them and use Alembic. But with Ozone, you don't have to do that because the characters that you see here in Unreal is exactly the same character that you see in Maya. All of the deformers you have available in one, you have available in the other. So that means that we can bring just the animation down, right? So the way this works is, right, we have a blueprint, which represents basically the Ozone plugin in Unreal. You have an asset file, which is the rig described, right? All of the deformers, all the weights, everything that describes that character. You put these two together and you drop them into Engine, and now you have an asset that's ready to be animated. So to your point about control rig, if you attach a control rig to this, you can animate it live in Unreal, and you don't need Maya for anything, right? Now, what we did though is we're treating this like, if you think about a virtual production workflow where you're animating in Maya and you're bringing it down to Unreal, because we don't have to compromise on our deformers and don't have to use Alembics. And I should say, right, this little test animation as an Alembic, we did that, was 265 megabytes, right? This clip here, which is our animation data, you can see is 13. It's 90% small.
That's awesome.
And it's pixel perfect results between the two environments. So now you can, and this really sets up the stage for early kind of working in parallel. You can update the asset without changing the animation. You can update the animation without changing the asset, right? So now in some ways, you can work in parallel. And these clips are so light that the load times in Unreal are much faster. Everything about getting animation out of Maya, now instead of saving Alembics, you're dealing with files that are 90% smaller. So it's faster out of Maya. It's faster load times in Unreal and much smaller files on disk, right?
That's a really cool workflow.
Yeah. And if we look at this, right, we are still dealing with sub-Ds, right? So what this means is I don't have to export a smooth asset as an Alembic to get smooth results, right? So it's at least four times smaller, because this is all I need to rig. This is all I need to export. So I'm carrying, it's across the board. I'm dealing with lighter assets, lighter animation data, quicker load times, quicker save times. It really solves a problem in a real way, right?
100%.
And then if we look at this now inside of Maya, we'll jump over to here. Here is that same asset in Maya, right? I'm moving this character around, and I'm using an off-the-shelf puppet system. I'm using M-Gear, right?
Oh, cool.
So the joints, the IK, the space switching, the puppet, if you will, is all M-Gear. It's a standard Maya tool. And what we've done is we've taken the Maya skin weights out and plugged in the Ozone deformers. So basically, we're treating the puppet as like a scaffold, right? And we're hanging our deformers on top. And honestly, this is something to bring up, is that we are just the deformers. So all of your same animation tools, all your same animation interfaces and everything with a little bit of glue stay exactly the same.
Okay.
Right? So we talked about how do we make it so that studios can adopt Ozone? Well, part of it was making it so that their animators don't have to throw away all of their systems and tools. You can use Animbot with Ozone because we're just the deformers. Right? Your rigging TDs don't have to throw everything away to start over. It's a little bit of glue, right? And if we look at this here, let me kind of show you how it works here. Oops, I need to capitalize the O because thank you, Maya. So here are the nodes, and I believe this is the right guy. Multi-node madness, right? So this, as far as Maya is concerned, Ozone is just another deformer. It's just another deformer. It's a first-class citizen. It's the same way it works in Unreal. We're a blueprint. We have inputs, and as far as Unreal is concerned, we're a first-class citizen. And if you crack this open, right, you're going to see all of the inputs for this character.
Wow.
So we have one node. So all of the channels going in, the floats, any matrix inputs, which is your joints, right, all flow into what we call the input harness. And then all of the execution happens in the Ozone core. And then it sends the results back out to Maya. So now your entire rig, your deformation rig, is one node. So from a Maya perspective, it's much faster because it's executing in our system and not dealing with a web of hundreds or thousands of nodes in Maya, that there's an implicit cost, right? The more nodes you have in Maya, the more your execution time
for sure.
adds up. But what it also means is, when we think about the control rig, right, M gear in this case, all of its elements sit out here and they just wire into the node. So that's why I say a little bit of glue. You just translate, I have a locator that I'm dragging equals what channel value in Ozone. And again, all your animators, they get to use the same interfaces they're used to. They just get faster, better looking characters. And everything that they do here in Maya works exactly the same in Unreal or any place we report it. So eventually we will be in all those other environments, right?
So 100% of your deformation is just one node. You're not going to grab some other nonlinear deformer type set and then adding that on and blend shapes. It's all
our, now we have those deformers and we'll get into that, right? We have our own joint solver. We have blend shapes. We have slide on curve, scale on curve. We have bends and we have a whole library of different deformation options. But you author them in Ozone. And then when it's all ready to be animated, it's all inside of one node. So you still have all of those tools. You just have to use the Ozone tool. And actually what this meant was, I call it the 2-hammer toolbox, right? Which is, right now, if you want to take something, most of the time, if you want to rig anything, you're pretty much limited to joints and blend shapes, the 2-hammer toolbox. Sure. Small hammer to big hammer. And with Ozone, that toolbox is expanded, right? All those deformers I just discussed are there available to you. But we can also make rigging better. We can take an idea, and in this case, I'm going to show you a joint solver, and make that better. So if we think about, just generally speaking, when I bring this up here, and, we think about a wrist, right? You have your up and down, you have your left and right, but when you twist it, right, the weighting is averaging down the arm, right? Now, in a traditional Maya way, or any joint system, right, you have a joint right at the wrist, and you have a second joint right behind it, and one, if not two joints down the arm, right? Because you're averaging your twist out. So that means a system like this, it's not 3 joints, it could be 6, 9, 12, right? You've got all these extra rigging structure under the hood to try to get the surface the way you want. But with Ozone, what you're seeing here is actually a single joint and a different weight map for each axis of rotation. So
crazy.
This is separate weights for twist than for your FB and LR. And it's just built into the joint solver, right? And if you look here, right, same thing. There's not a blend shape in sight. This is me having different weight maps for different axes of rotation. So now we can, at the very fundamental level, make rigging artists' lives better by solving, or at least giving you tools to help solve shoulders, wrists, hips, and ankles that we solve and have to fight against every single time we build a character. And being that rigging artists are ruling the roost at Ozone, we're like, no, we need to solve this problem in a better or more robust way. But it still takes a standard joint as an input. So now your skeleton, your actual puppet, can be simpler, less nodes you're executing, and allow the deformers to actually solve the problem on the surface instead of the scaffold on the hood, right? And if we think about, this is a joint for the head because it made the most sense, but the mouth is actually a slide on a curve. So let me open up our UI here, right? I'm just going to bring this out. So if we think about this here, right, this is actually sliding along a curve. I have a curve that's authored here, right, and it's sliding along it. If we look at the front of the mouth, I'm going left and right. That's another curve.
Oh, that's crazy, man.
Right? Now, what that means, though, is that from all the way up here to all the way down to the head, I'm doing all of that with two deformers. Slide up and down, slide left and right. There aren't a bunch of joints all over it. I'm not dealing with all these little islands of control that have to, and then all the mechanisms underneath to do it.
Right.
It's two deformers. Right. I'm doing a lot more on the surface with a lot less rigging. You're getting more for less. And this is a common theme that you're going to see with how we've designed our system. And if we look at the tail here, right, this is a joint here, but I have a parametric bend. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Right, I have a parametric bend for the tail. That this is not a string of pearls. It's not a bunch of joints. It's a single line as a bend, and it's its own weight map. And everything you're seeing here works nicely together, right? So joint solvers and slides and bends all fitting together nicely. So now you have this capability, and everything you built here, it runs exactly the same in Unreal. Right? You're getting the same exact performance characteristics, right? And if we come back to here, we can kind of take this to the next level with a, we call it our little science project here, but where we can look at all different ways that we can use deformers that you don't use in your traditional setup. So this rig, this animation you're seeing here, this character, there are no joints, there are no bunches. So imagine trying to do this kind of rig in a traditional way.
And this is in the Unreal Engine, which blows.
This is live in Engine. And what you're seeing here is 12 deformers. That's it. Right? So as a rigging artist, you can start using how would you do this with joints and blend shapes, right? It gets to be really difficult when you think about it. So here, let's take a look at, here's that same asset in Maya. So let me show you how the rig works, right? So we have a curl, right? We can curl the front here. Look at that, right? I can tighten this down to give it like a little parchment feel, like it's rolling up. I can roll this back up here, and then I can tighten that up, right? And because we have an ordered system, right? It's an order of operations based system. I can do things like this, where I can take this forward and backward translate, and I can literally push it through the curl spaces, because the translate is executing before the curls.
So it's like swimming through, basically.
You got it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Exactly right. You're basically saying, I want to execute the translate, then I want to execute the curl. And because all of the deformers in the stack are always active all the time, you can mung that value wherever you want it to be, and it's going to execute in that order, right? Now, what we can also do, let me go ahead and clear these guys out, right? Is we can animate our weights, right? And what does that mean, right? So go here and we'll use this. This means that when I do this, I can add this ripple. What this is just a single translate. I'm translating upward, and then I'm dynamically changing the value of the weight map by a sine wave.
That's insane, man.
Right? And because I'm using a sine wave, I can animate the sine wave. So now I'm pushing that animated weight through space, right? But it's through weight space.
That's crazy. Is it like a volumetric, like a 3D volume, or like a projected 2D kind of map?
Projected is the perfect word. So we call these projectors. So we have in this case, there's a curve that's setting a parameterization of 0 to 1. And then I have a gradient that's remapping that 0 to 1. And then I'm applying that to the surface. And then I can take that gradient and I can animate that curve and change its shape to change how the weights are, presented onto the surface or applied to the surface. And you can run all kinds of math operations on different kinds of weights to get a combined effect on the surface. It all happens in real time.
That's nuts, man.
Yeah, it's a totally different way of thinking. And, in this case, right, all of this complexity is one deformer. It's just a translate. So again, we talk about how we can do more on the surface with less rigging, right? Now, if you paid attention here, you'll also notice that the front part of the carpet is not being affected.
Where the curl is.
Right. Where the curl is, it's not affecting. So your silhouette for your animators on the front part of the carpet, it's not effective. Well, that's because I can add other types of weight operators on this. In this case, I've got another gradient that's subtracting the weight off that matches up with the curl. And if I go here and I go to my curl and I roll this up, you'll see that the curl or the ripple is being subtracted away.
Oh, cool. So it's following as the curl moves, it's following along and it's subtracting the weights as it creeps along.
That's right. And what that means is your animators with this rig can roll the carpet up, roll the carpet back out, have the ripple happen, and not have to counter animate anything. You literally can just transition it and automatically carves it out. Right?
That's really awesome.
Yeah. So it's a really unique way of thinking about how weights can be applied and how deformers can be combined to create interesting effects. Right? Now, if we take all this and let's put this into a more traditional way, right? Like, how do you take these key ideas? So I'm bringing up a character here, and we think about it. Stack of deformers. Each deformer, so order of operations. Every deformer can have its own weight map, and every weight map can be animated. So you start looking at the multiplicative effect of all of these things coming together. So the flexibility you get on your surface can be really powerful. Here is, a standard, feature animation like character. Let me, we'll bring up, actually, I'll use the M gear picker here. So this kind of just to illustrate that whatever animation interface you already have as your studio, you can repurpose to use with Ozone. You don't have to use RUI at all. So if we look at this, I'll use the regular old channel box, right? The brows, right, are a slide on a curve. So this up and down, there's a curve that we authored, and it's sliding up and down it. The individual shapers, I'm animating the weight of that one slide.
That's nuts.
Right?
That's really
so now
cool.
It's not a bunch of joints and a bunch of blended weights. It's one deformer, and I'm projecting weights on there, and I'm animating those weights, and they combine through the weights. So you can do the same thing with the lids, right? So I have a lid rig, allows me to pick this up, and then I can, shift them to bias to the pupil. We can come here and let's go ahead. I can move the whole mouth up and down, right? Move this left and right. I can twist it, right? And then the nose, I can use a bend to bend the nose so the arc of action for the forehead follows all the way down to the lip line.
Right.
So I'm using slide on curves, I'm using bends, I'm using translates. All these pieces are all flowing together to create this face. The mouth corners, right, are two separate curves. A slide over and a slide up. These are individual pieces, right? Then I take the jaw, and this is just a rotate, right? Because I open the jaw up. Now, what's interesting, or one of the interesting things to this, is because I'm dealing with a stack of deformers and I'm dealing with independent weight maps, that means I can think of each idea as its own idea, right? So when I think of a jaw opening, I'm not fighting against all these other joints. I can think about just this jaw and how it works. I can also extend its effect much further. So we look up here at the temple. When I mung this here, you'll see, my camera lets me zoom, right? That you're seeing tiny little movements all the way up to the top of the head.
Right. So you have that. You're not worried about interacting or normalizing all those weights.
That's right. I'm not. This is the interesting thing about the system. The weights aren't normalized, but the controls are. Right now, the control normalization is a design choice. You don't have to do it. But the way we built our rigs is that with this system, I can now think about my jaw in isolation. And I can think about the brows in isolation and the lids and so on and so forth. All these weights are adding together. And that's another important point. With this system, our weights are additive, not subtractive. With a joint-based system, if I wanted to say added something to the cheek and I add a joint, what I have to do is take away from weights that already exist.
Yeah, it's a battle.
You're fighting against something that's there. Here, I could introduce a new cheek deformer into the stack with its own weight map, and it just passes its results on to the next deformer. Now, there's no free lunch. You have to make sure things play nicely together, but each idea can be its own, and then you're just blending.
That's awesome.
You're not destroying anything else that's there when you do it.
Yeah, I think just like from a rigorous I would say most of our time rigging faces in Maya is spent finding clever ways to keep let's say you have a bunch of blend shapes. Okay, you're going to need a bunch of combo correctives, all these different things. Either blend shapes are going to fight, or deformer or joints are going to, like you said, take away from each other. So you're you're battling this. You're expending a lot of energy. So here, you're just, it's like your artistic ability kind of unleashed. You're just thinking about what you want to get, and you're not thinking about these clever little hacks you have to do to get there. That's really cool.
Right. There's a lot of the pain with the current setup that isn't present with this way of thinking, right? To your idea now, like what you just mentioned, when you're dealing with a joint based setup, right? You basically have this scaffold underneath, and then you have to fight with the scaffold to get things to move the way you want them to move. So the surface gives you the result you want.
Right.
With Ozone's stack, independent weights, and animated weights, this whole system, each idea is its own, and you're directly affecting the surface with it. And there's still spatial things. You have a curve, and I'll show that when we get into some of the offering. Right? You still have elements that you work with, but it's for that one idea. I'm not worried about, like a lip, for instance, right? I have, I just showed you, I'll just kind of pull this up. This is one slide on curve, and I'm animating the weights. But I have a separate weight map for the forward and backward, the left and right, the curl forward, the curl backward, the scale. All of those are different. And I'll show, again, as we get into the demo, I'll actually show this in practice, where you can go, oh, when my mouth is moving one way, I want a different weight map than when it's moving another. I'm not tied to one joint having uniform weighting, right? I can have a different weight for this way, and a different weight for this way, and a different weight from that way. So that when your animator's going, hey, when he goes, ooh, can I tug the nose corner a little bit more? It's not a corrective on top of a corrective on top of a corrective on top of a corrective. You're this house of cards that becomes incredibly unmanageable.
Sure.
Right. And everything we see here, right? Everything that's in Maya, we go into Unreal, works the same wherever Ozone is. So right now we're in Maya and Unreal, but imagine we could be in any DCC. And the rig that we built for one is 1-to-1 here. So now when I hit play, right, this is playing live in Engine, right? Everything you're seeing here, right? So let's do the same thing, right? So I'll do my sub D. I can set the values, increase the resolution. This is all live, right?
That's sick, man.
Yeah, right. And when I mean live, I mean it's live, right? So if I come here and I go and select the jaw, I can mung this stuff. All of these, this is all real. It's not pre-recorded. Now it's a clip. It's a cached clip, right? We save that image clip, but then you can override those channels as needed.
Right? That's so badass. I think up till now this has been on not doable, or you said, or like you mentioned, you'd have to bake out like an Olympic cache or something to get this in Engine, but there's nothing to get this kind of performance.
And you get the kind of subtlety and emotional conveyance that like a feature animation rig can give you anywhere. And so imagine you're in a game and you can get a character that connects with an audience like this. Now, at the end of the day, we're just pushing points in space. So this could be done with photoreal. It can be done with a creature. It can be done with, any of these guys. Right.
That's so cool, man.
The little bits of stuff, right? Here's a shot from a short we're working on with her. We'll let them load. Right. So check this out. Right. And again, everything you see here is all, this is all live. So now you truly can, the same kind of techniques and the same kind of quality you'd see in a game or in a movie or a TV show, you can bring it to your game. Right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
And we're a gateway drug, right? Meaning your animators are in Maya now. Most of them are in Maya. You can animate in Maya and you can bring things into Unreal and get the power of both environments without having to have a separate asset for each.
Right, it's the same asset, right?
It's the same asset, the same controls. If I make a fix to a rig, you get it in both places. Right? You get a choice. And as the Unreal Engine's animation tools mature, and I'm in 5.3 right now, but like 5.4's out, 5.5's coming. They're chasing after this. Animators will have a choice. Like you, as the studio and the rig artist, will not have to compromise. Right? Now let me talk about, so this is from the first real big engagement we had with Ozone was with Real Effects. They're a studio that's based out of Dallas and Montreal. and we did a show called Super Giant Robot Brothers. It was 10 episodes, 5,000 shots, 150 characters, and it was all Ozone.
Jeez.
And yeah, so like we have delivered at scale with this tech. Here, I'll play. You'll hear some audio.
That's a Roger. Twister, Obliterator, activated. But you, sir,
right. This is shaded like cartoon, but it's all 3D.
You were right this whole time. I'm a gorgeous, a red hot nothing. That's
right. And in this case, these guys never had a shot in Unreal that loaded slower than 90 seconds.
That's crazy. And it's just done.
Well, when they wanted to update an animation, they would just send something out of Maya, shoot it in with the clip, update the clip. If they needed to make an update to the rig, they would just update the rig. They didn't have to recache anything, right? They just updated the character with notes and whatever. So load times were faster, interacting with the scenes were faster, lighting was faster. Animators had real-time rigs in Maya, right? And one thing, like what you can also see here is the variety, the diversity in the types of characters. And here's another little doodle that, again, that kind of reinforces this idea of the different kinds of characters we can do. This is a little Lego guy that we messed around with. But if you look at this face rig here, or this character, or the face on this character, it is a 3D face rig that's being pushed into 2D in real time. So we've created a reusable face rig, right? So even though it's a texture here, let's go ahead and zoom in. Right. Another thing, of course, with sub-Ds, you can just get perfectly smooth results, right? No matter how far you're zooming in, right? So like
you're not getting
real resolution independence. But here, let's do this. So I'm going to grab this, right? Like this is all live. And so what we're doing is we've got a 3D rig, a multi-plane face rig, an orthographic camera that's rendering it as a texture in Engine and pushing it into a UDIM in real time. So it is a 2D result, but it's a 3D rig.
Killer, man.
Right? And like all this stuff is all live, right? So I can make these guys bigger, I can twist these guys down, I can play with this, right? And everything, right, is all live. So check it out. If I frame this out,
nuts.
Right? Here's that face rig, right? And as I move this stuff up and down, right, they're 3D elements. So what's cool about this, is that now I can take all my standard animation controls, and this is something we didn't talk about too much, but we will in the next part of the demo, is we create values, say when a jaw opens, and we give it a common value. So that jaw open at 100 is sort of the standard. A mouth corner up at 100 means something. So you basically create a normalized performance space.
Got it.
But then you switch the characters out underneath. You switch the face rig underneath. Animators get the same values for the same kinds of expressions and emotional.
And it transfers 100%.
Well, nothing's 100, right?
Sure.
So let's say 80, 90. But even if it's 80, 70, 60, imagine taking a whole animation library from a character and then reusing it on a different asset in the scene or on a different show, and then modifying it to that character for that character's little differences. But you don't have to start at zero. Phonemes, speech, dialogue can all be. You can set a whole bunch of basics that get you there, and then tune it. Right. So normalized rigs, normalized animation controls, and not normalized weights and rigging.
Got it.
It's actually flipping it on its head. Most things that I see in the biz now is the other way, right? Where the face rigs, the animation rigs are not normalized, but all the using joints, whatever, all the weights are.
Right.
And we're
just kind of backwards.
We're flipping it.
Yeah, I can see it's definitely important to have that on the, like you said, on the animation interface itself. Like you said, if a jaw open is 100 on one character, it should be 100 on the other, not 125 or.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, when it comes down to it, that's just rig design, right? And I don't remember if I said it earlier, but part of our the value proposition of Ozone is that we give you the rigs. So everything that I'm showing you, this face rig and anything that I'm showing you, those rigs come along with the Ozone license, and we give all of those rigs to you, and we teach you how to use them, including our philosophy on normalization and everything else, so that you can, if you didn't want to rig anything, build a component and just wanted to make a character with Ozone, you could. You wouldn't need to be able to build anything. You get a character pipeline in a box.
That's badass. And just in case anybody doesn't know, the team at Ozone, I've worked with some of these guys, Jason Davies, Scotty Sharp. They're some of the heaviest hitters in the industry, Pixar, Blue Sky Studios. They're not just, anybody made these facial rigs. They're top of the, tip of the spear type stuff for sure.
No, I think we're very fortunate. Brian Tyndall, who made the art of Moving Points, is on the team. Jason Bickerstaff, who was a 20-year vet at Pixar. Brad Clark, who is one of the owners and runs Rigging Dojo.
Sure.
Yeah, so I assembled the Avengers.
Yeah, 100%, man.
The rigging Avengers to be able to do this, right?
You definitely did.
Well, to do this kind of thing, and I'm opening up a sample asset here while we're talking. You had to have the people that knew how to do it, right? It's not just make the shiny technology. I see this all the time, right? Where people will make a piece of tech, but you don't have the artists. It's like aeronautical engineers making a plane, but not having pilots on the team, right? So if you get the best pilots, then your plane's going to be better. It's going to perform better because the pilot can give you real-time feedback, right? And our principal engineer, Eric Solby, he worked at Weta and Blizzard, Epic Games and whatever. He's an amazing talent, and he listens. He sits there and wants to build. He built what this system is. And he's not the only one on the team. We got a bunch of great engineers, but he's the one that jumped on first with me when I was like, hey, so I got this crazy idea, and he jumped in. But the philosophy is you got to listen to the user. You got to see what it is and what we need to get the job done in a real production setting. And that's another thing. And a lot of people don't know what it's like to do this work. I mean, you do, and how hard it can be to deliver these things. So we're looking at not only the core tech, and I can't show this stuff yet because we're still building some of these pieces, but all of the pipeline tools too, like transferring rigging from one character to the next, taking and updating meshes with changes and all the things all the pain points that a big studio gives you tools for. We are going to give you as an Ozone user, so that you really can deliver characters for production, not just make one, but deliver one.
Right. That's awesome.
All right. So here, let me show you. I'm going to show you some of the authoring stuff. So this is the Ozone panel. So if you think about the way our system works, because we are agnostic, we are our own file format. This is like a window. Like you reach in to grab data out, pull things out, work on them, and push them back in, right? Because it's a self-contained system. It's not woven into Maya in that way. We have our own node. We have our own file format, and the way the execution works, right? It's contained. So we have to give you access into that. So this is what this is. It's a way of looking into the Ozone file and making changes. You go ahead and Jay's just rotating a joint around and turn the joints off here. So we'll just look at the face rig. So right away, if we look at what comes along for the ride in this case, we have a biped rig, and that's what we're delivering first. Is a biped rig that you can use however you want. There will be more rigs that we deliver over time, but this is the one we're focusing on. Each one of these is what we call a module, right? The brows, the lids, the eyes, the jaw, the mouth. It's the individual components that make up that face rig, and all of these components you are given as part of the deal. Now, anybody that's ever worked with any kind of feature animation type character knows how deep these things can get, like how much control you have, right? So if we go here and I hit shift, and I will take a second to open, but it'll show you everything that's in this rig, right?
Okay.
So if we go in here, you can just see all of the elements that are in the rig. It is a mighty list. So it can be daunting, right? So one of the first things we did with this UI, and Jason Davies is really the one that pioneered this, was create a really robust filtering so you can find what you're looking for. So for instance, I go jaw, and it's going to filter down and show me only the jaw elements. If I do -A, it's only going to show me A bars, right? So in this case, this yellow bar here means that I've got an animation input. So there is a set of controls that animators are using, but I'm in my rigging context. So what I can do is I can right click on this and I can say enable an override. Now I can among this channel independent of what the animation control is. So now while I'm in my rig interface, no matter what's going on in animation, I'm not messing with their stuff and I have access to the rig directly, right? So here's our jaw open. Now what I want to do is I want to change where the jaw rotates from, right? Again, single idea. So now if I go here and I do -F, it shows me all of the fitting elements. So I'm going to say I want the jaw UD and I'm going to pull this rig fitting. When I pull it, what it's doing is it's pulling a transform out of the Ozone file, making a locator and connecting that locator live.
Oh, cool. That's
right?
Awesome.
So if I come here and I go under the rig, you'll see a fitting folder and then I have a locator, right? So there's my locator, right? And if I come here, I can move this around live, right? So what I'm doing now is not thinking about anything else, just the jaw open, and I'm dynamically changing where the pivot of rotation is. So now think about, instead of doing a bunch of rigging, throwing it over to your animation department, an animator, they do a testing and give you a bunch of notes, and then you get it back. Bring the animator into the room with you and say, all right, let's figure out what feels right. You know, where do you want this thing to be? How far, you know, what do we want the character to look like? And you figure this out together. Now the weighting isn't all done. I'd have to adjust stuff. But the fact is, I can close that loop with the animator and make it super tight. The feedback loop can be, you're working together. Because all these elements are live. I can edit this stuff live. And because they're independent ideas, what I do with the jaw open doesn't affect the jaw left and right, doesn't affect the mouth, you know, nothing. Right? So I can say, well, I don't like that. I want to go back. You can either push the fitting back in and say, hey, keep this, or you can discard it. So I'm just going to discard the fitting, right? And now my jaw is back where I want it to be.
That's cool.
And all the elements work that way. Now let's look at like weighting. So if I do -W, it's going to show me the weight map. So I select this, you can see that is my weight map for my jaw, right? So when I mung this out, that's what that looks like. So if I click this, I can toggle it because you don't need to see the weight map to edit it as long as it's selected. So I can come in here now. Let me make sure I'm not selecting through my model. Yay, Maya. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start editing some points. So, well, here, let me just show this to you so you can see it. So we have two different ways of interacting with weights. You have your paint weights, which is your standard Maya painting, right? Flooding, subtracting, adding, it's all there. But we have the mung tool for like modeling with weights. So what this means is I have direct access and I can directly set the values dynamically. And this is the way I like to work. So I can come in here, right? And I can just edit that.
Oh, that's crazy.
Right. And I can select these points here and I can edit that. And I'm just literally changing the weights by hand.
That's awesome. Right? Yeah. Cause you're kind of, what you see is what you get, and then you could smooth it after. And
well, here you go. I can smooth while. I can go right here and go, clearly I missed this point here. Thank you, Maya. Right. So I'll just smooth that guy down. And here, we can turn this off so we're not seeing it anymore. Right. I can come in here and I can mung these weights down, and let's go here and I'll smooth it out. Right. So now, you know, I've got this like cheek bulge coming down here. Right?
Sure.
Let's go ahead and smooth it a little bit more. But these things are all jacked up. Well, here's the beauty of the mung tool. I just come in here and I just tune these guys to where I want them. I'm now cleaning these weights up to make this work exactly the way I want. You're modeling with your deformers, right? And of course, all the different smooth tools, I can run smooth. All this stuff works out, and there's tons of math operations. And we can show some of those, but you can see where I'm just getting in here, and I'm gonna smooth these guys out, right? And all that was live. I can watch it while I work, right? And then I can come and I can mirror it. So if I come into here and say, cool, I want to now see this on the right, I just hit mirror, moves it over to the right. So now I'm pulling these guys and I'm adjusting, right? So there's a lot of control. And of course you can use your smooth brush, you can use all this other stuff too, but when you really want to get exactly what you want, and because each idea is independent, when I come in here and I say, yeah, I want to tune this out so that my stuff's all looking clean, right? I don't have to worry about how I'm affecting other weights that are in the system.
That's rad. Yeah.
And this is something where the uninitiated will go, oh my gosh, that seems like so much work. Why can't I just smooth it? Well, every character's got different shapes on things, right? So smooth will get you so far, But in just a couple of, not even minutes, right? I mean, a minute, I've gone through and I'm just tuning this weight so all of my spans are flowing better.
Right. And what I typically would do I would be like the add and subtract brushes. So then you're kind of going through with a small brush, vertice by vertice, kind of like you're doing, but you're either adding or you're subtracting. This is a more interactive way to go about it. And like you said, you're not worrying about destroying the weights of some other joints influence or whatever it might be.
All right. So now, it's just a better. I mean, this is always my opinion, but in my opinion, it's just a far better way of working.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Right.
Whenever you grab a vertice and affect it directly, and you're not kind of indirectly trying to get what you want.
Off. Yeah. The gloves are off. Right. Now let's think about sculpts. Right. So I talked a little bit about blend shapes and I gave a bunch of examples of, hey, this thing doesn't have, it's all just done with deformers. There are no blend shapes. And that's, in a way, that's a little hyperbole. The point that I'm trying to make is that your traditional setup with joints and blend shapes, you are forced to use blend shapes for everything. Mm-hmm. And as you make more and more blend shapes, it gets more and more fragile, right? Trying to change the pivot of the jaw, if it was all blend shapes, you blow the whole face up, right? But here, because most of it's with deformers, it's way more robust. You can exaggerate your character much further without breaking stuff. You can make changes. And it doesn't mean you can't break stuff. Animators are gifted. They can break anything. But the fact is, you're going to give them more flexibility without them coming back to you. You're going to be able to make changes and let them push things without having to come back and be rigged. Make change art directions much later in the pipeline without having to break stuff, right? Because of the system just being a better way of working. But there are sculpts. That's what we call them, right? So there are blend shapes. We call them sculpts. And the idea is it's more of a mindset difference, because it is the same thing. The idea is that you do 90% with deformers, and then you do volume and tightening of shapes with sculpts.
Got it.
And you have a separate sculpt that is a separate thing for each one of these controls. So they're available to you, right? So if I come in here and I do -S, you can see, oh, well, when the sculpt, UD pause, UD neg, left pause, left neg, when I'm doing swings forward and backward. So you have the ability to add these extra sculpts on top. The key is it's really more of a philosophy thing. You want to do everything with deformers first, get everything balanced first, then add these sculpts. When you do it that way, you can transfer rigging from one character to the next much easier.
Oh, for sure.
Again, your animators can exaggerate much easier. It's just a better way of going.
The model updates, like transferring weights, is a lot easier than transferring deltas.
You got it. Because a jaw open, generally speaking, is going to feel about the same on each character, even if we do have to do some tuning of the weights. Mm-hmm. Right? Sure. Here I'm going to do UD, so we're only looking at the up and down. But so let's add a sculpt in, right? So I'm going to come in here, and what we do is you say, I'm going to pull a sculpt. It says it takes wherever the state of the character is and makes a copy that you can do any kind of modeling with you want. So I go here and I pull sculpt. It's now created, a separate model that I can model with. So I'm going to do something simple. Let's pull some points out here, right? So now I will push that in, and I'll say, hey, push it in there. Now what it does is that it calculates where the sculpt deformer is in comparison to any number of deformers that are active.
Okay.
So the idea of, if I like an elbow, and actually I can show this, but the idea that when I do a rotation, I want to tighten up that point, right? If the sculptor was executing after the rotation, right, you'll see linear movements, right? You'll see these, it's going from a straight line from one thing to the next. Right. But if you can say, well, I want it to end up here, but I want to figure out how to make it go, like actually execute the morph sculpt first, so that when it executes, it ends up in the right place. Right. So what we have is a system that will walk through the rig and figure out where it needs to be. So you model it where you want. And then it goes, oh, to end up here through these 10 or 12 deformers, I need to move here. So it moves a little bit, so it ends up in the right spot. What that does, it means that you're doing a lot less work in the sculpt, and you'll never have a vertex moving on your face in a straight line. Everything will move through it in arcs. You never have
following the jaw arc. It's following all these.
Right. Yeah. So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to push the sculpt. And what it's going to do is it's going to calculate, it's going to go and figure this out. And it figured out the inverse of that to get it where it needs to be. Right. So now it's going here. Now I keep using the word now. Because a sculpt, as far as we're concerned, is just a vector offset, right? It's an amount and a direction.
Sure.
We can run math operations on these vectors. So if I come in here and I grow my selection, I can smooth the sculpt vectors. I'm smoothing the offsets. I can come to here in this little math operator here. Let's say I go to 1, 5 and I multiply. I can now multiply those vectors upward. I can grow it out a little bit more and I can smooth it.
That's so cool. That's
right.
That's so cool.
Right.
Man.
So now I've created this thing where it goes like that. Right. And then I can say, well, that's a little bit too much. So I'm going to come here to say 0.8 and I'm going to multiply it down. So now I'm going to lower it. Right. And then just like a weight map, I can mirror it. So now I mirror it to the other side. Right. And so imagine if you do like a deltoid, right, where you're bringing the arm down and maybe say you collapse it too much or not enough. You can select those points and smooth them, or you can multiply and increase and decrease the magnitude of that skull without modeling anything. You're just changing the math of the vectors.
That's super powerful. That's something that you don't see at all in any
and I can come here too, and I can say, hey, I want to equal it 0 and just subtract out sculpt. Because
just in case anybody's wondering, like how is this different from just smoothing out a shape with like an averaging? It's not. It's actually taking that vector those points are moving in and applying it to vertices around it. It's doing something different than other sculpt tools don't do. I just wanted to.
If you're doing it in the modeling phase, it's exactly the same. And that when you pull that shape, you can push it into ZBrush, run ZBrush modeling on it, whatever, bring it in and update it. So you're not even limited to just working in Maya. You can spit it out, do whatever you want, bring it back.
Right. You could throw deformers on it. You could do whatever you want to it, just get the shape you want, and it bakes it back in.
Yep. All right. So let me show you the brow, which is another thing here. So let's go and let's do brow. And I'll do -A and we'll do UD to show me the up and downs, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these and I'm going to put them into our scratch panel. So you can see how I can filter this list and kind of look through stuff. But sometimes you want to just focus on the handful of avars and controls you want to work with at a time. So if I right click here and I add to scratch panel, it'll basically allow me to take a subset of the master list and put it into this working space. And this is transient, right? It doesn't save with things. So let's do -W. I'll bring weight containers in here and we'll add those. We'll toggle weight maps off. We'll do -F for fitting. So I'll bring my brow UD curve and I'll add to my scratch panel. So I need to do the same thing I did with the jaw and enable the overrides. Let's go ahead. Remove that. Right. So you can see that I'm able to move this up and down. Well, what this is actually doing is sliding along a curve, right? And just like we did with the jaw, I can edit the path. Instead of it being a locator, I can actually edit the path. So let me grab this curve here and I'm going to pull the rig fitting. So now it creates this curve, right? And I can edit it. So if I come in here, you can see that as I move through here, right, it's changing this live, right? So now as I mung this channel up and down, you can see it's sliding up and down the curve, right? Awesome. Again, when you think about working with an animator and getting the feel for things, break it into these big ideas. Like I'm not worried about the in, mid, and outs and all the little things. Just does the brow move up and down the way I like? Does the mouth move the way I like? How do they want the nose to move? You can actually do all this live, knowing, hey, the weights aren't done, the sculpts aren't there, but like I'm figuring out the feel of this character. And once the animator's happy with the feel, the performance, then you can go in and start tuning stuff. And you're not worried about going, the jaw's not moving quite right. I mean, those things happen anyway, but it happens a lot less often if you can work together and tighten the loop up, right?
For sure.
So now we talk about, I keep using the word now. I apologize for that. Down to now. Let's normalize this, right? So we go, well, this is kind of what I like, but I want it to look like that when I'm at 100, right? So in green are what we call avars or animated channels, right? If I come in here and I do a -D, and actually let's just move all of this, right? This shows me what we call default values. So this is saying, hey, how much, in this case, we call them scale factors. What is the scale factor for my up and down? So now what I can do, and here, let's go ahead and just add this to our scratch panel so we can see it, right? I have my values at 100, but I want to set what I want 100 to be. I want that to be 100.
Oh,
so
nice.
now is my, right? So you can tune what the artistic value means on the surface. So you have a rigging channel, a default channel that you set that. The animators only ever see what's in green. They just know that when I'm at 100, I get the shape I want. Right? So if you've got a character that's a golem that's, a mile tall, or a little mouse character, regardless if it's a slide along a curve, a translate in space, you can say, animator, when you get 100, you get the right artistic result. Normalized,
That's really cool.
Normalized animation controls with non-normalized, and that's really powerful.
Makes me think, how does it work if you overdrive, let's say the browse to 150 or 200? Is there? It just keeps going along the curve, or is it kind of?
You can always break something, right? But you can notice that it didn't destroy it.
Sure.
It didn't go to shred land. And if I wanted to, I could come into this right now, right? And let's say I grab this weight, right? So I'm going to I could tune this out. I could give myself more. Here, let's make these both 200. So I'm looking at even left and right. So I can come in here and I can start smoothing these weights. So I could come into this and let's go. So it's funny. I'm such not a Maya person.
Well, no, this is really cool because in my experience, a lot of times animators want that ability to go past, whatever the limitation might be. And
that turn off. Well, the thing is, you can always break any rig, right? Like it's just the truth. Animators can break anything.
Oh, but for sure.
Just by the design of the system, I just keep getting points all over the darn place. Animators can exaggerate much further without breaking stuff, because most of the movement's happening with a deformer instead of a sculpt or a bunching.
Sure.
So now I can come in here and I can start smoothing this out, right? Right? It's coming in there. I don't know why it's not updating, because I'm giving a live demo. But you can see how I've now smoothed it and faded it out a little further.
Sure.
Right? And if I wanted to, I could grab a sculpt in here and I could fill that in. So that when you pull it up, right? So it's all there, and everything I did here had no effect whatsoever on the brow left and right. So let's go here, LR, and we'll go ahead and I will enable the overrides, right? I didn't change any of this. The weight map for the left and right is completely different than the weight map for the up and down. Now, it doesn't mean you can't copy and reuse it. You can, absolutely. But you don't have to.
Right. I think if you had just made a tool that just split out maps from different axes of movement, that would have been badass enough. But
yeah.
This is really cool.
Yeah, let me bring up another. I'm going to bring up another character. This is a character we're working on with Henson.
Okay.
So they have a world-class digital puppetry system. It's insane how cool this stuff is. And because we're just deformers, any kind of digital character can be driven by any kind of animation technology.
For sure.
Whether it's mocap or whatever, right? Mocap, hand keys, in this case, digital puppets. And so it's awesome watching what they do. And they have a really interesting approach to animation. Like they've done shows where they can produce 10 minutes of animation in one day.
That's nuts.
Right? Like, because they do everything in real time. It is actually nuts. And so when I was talking with Courtney over there, Courtney Day, I was like, we should connect their chocolate and our peanut butter together. And so we've been working on this. We're gonna actually show this character off at Unreal Fest, actually live puppet. So I'm just gonna show you the rigging itself. Yeah. This entire screen.
Oh, I'm not seeing your screen yet.
Nope,
Okay.
So this character I affectionately call Pork Chop. I was told that they can't name puppets after meat, so it's going to change. But I'm calling him. Yeah, I think if there's a law of puppets and meat is off the table.
That's off. Can't do it.
But I enjoy that, right? So here's all this stuff, and one thing, if you check my frame rate down on the right, I mean, I'm getting like 60, 70 frames a second. Right?
Nice.
It is so fast, right? Getting these guys out. But a couple of things I want to look at. Let me go ahead and set this back to 0. So 2 ideas. One is, and let's turn off, we don't see that. And do this, we bring up the panel. So we think about independent weight mass. We looked at it in the context of a face, and we're going to look at that again. But I want to show the elbow. This is something that I think most rigging TDs that have ever had to solve this problem will appreciate, right? So if I take this and I move that up and down, right, you can see that I've got that shape in the elbow. That is a weight map and a sculpt, right?
Okay.
I'm using those pieces together. So here, let's do arm. Let's do weights. And actually, no, it's not arm, it's elbow. So go through here, we'll do elbow. And we will also show sculpts. And let's do forward, right? So why are we not? Oh, here, let's do this. Let me grab these guys and add them to the scratch panel. Save myself problem. So we'll do elbow forward sculpt. All right. Make my life a little bit easier, right? So when we think about this, right? One thing that's nice about these guys broken out, and they're all independent, I can say, hey, show me with the sculpt on and off, right? Oh, why are you not working? Oh, I'm looking at the right. Why don't we use the left elbow forward instead of the right elbow forward? Why didn't you tell me, man? Jeez.
I was just waiting to see.
Right?
Sweat it out.
Yeah, no, it's all right. So, right. So I can say here, this is raw weights. Here's that's what the sculpt makes it do. I can also turn off the weights. So now I can see.
Oh, weird.
Well, this is what I talked about before, right?
Right.
This is the shape you want, right? So you get this and then you pull it and you sculpt on it, right? Then you get that. But what's happening under the hood is that it figures out, oh, if I put the points here, when I rotate my arm up, end up in this position.
Right. That's like the inverted.
Right. Yeah, because we were inverted. I'm old. So if we go through here, right, and you can see how none of the points are sliding and moving. They don't look like they're swinging around because they're not linearly trying to move. And I can say, well, here, let's just do this. So I'm going to grab this guy and I'm going to pull a sculpt. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the sculpt, and I'm just going to come in here and we're going to take, well, now I'm going to select through because I'm lazy. Right. So let's say I grab these guys and I just want to make it look like they're sliding down a bit more.
Sure.
Right. Right. So I'm going to grab these points. I'm going to move them down, and we'll just move down, make sure I wasn't doing anything on the other side. Right. So I'm just ugly modeling. Bear with
Poor
me.
pork chop.
Poor pork chop. See, if we keep using the name, she's going to have to.
I want to break that law. I want to see the puppet police come out.
Dang you, puppet police. All right. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to push this in. So now I'm going to push the sculpt. It's going to figure out its stuff. Right. Now, when I move this, let's get out of that mode. Right. You'll see that those sliding bits are moving straight down. They're not being arced at all. They're not being pulled. You're not having to fight against it and put these inner bits, right? And because we're dealing with, vector-based things, I can smooth this stuff out. So let me grab this and I'll hit smooth, and I can smooth the actual modeling out.
So did you just pull the sculpt before you smoothed it, or I didn't?
No, well, no, this is all live.
Okay.
I just smoothed it out, right? And I can undo that, and so you can play around with it. Now, one thing we don't have is smoothing amounts yet, but you'll be able to control different types of smoothing, surface aware smoothing, so it smooths but understands the topology and edge lengths and all kinds of fun stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Right. But end of the day, I mean, what we're looking at is I was able to think about how I wanted this thing to work. Oh, and look at that. It's like, look, man, I got some points over there. That's not a problem, right? So I come here and I grab these points. I select this and I just double click to 0 and hit equal. Done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Super easy to remove that stuff out.
That's really cool.
Now, another thing that, we always fight against, and I showed it with the puppy, right? Which is dealing with wrist twists, right? Well, if we look at this, right? This is the weight from my elbow up and down and left and right. But this is the weight map for my twist. The twist is separate from the up and down. That means, again, I can think about this thing in one place and do this completely independently.
That's so cool, man. And you're saving on all those twist joints that you don't have to deal with or rig
Zero.
Or figure out.
Your puppet gets much, much simpler. Again, less nodes to be managing. I need a wrist joint. I need an elbow joint. I need a shoulder joint. And that's it. You don't any of these other things, right? So now you see, all right, you go here, I'm twisting it, but let's say I want to change the twist weight. So I can come into this and I'm going to just start adding extra weights there. So I'm among my weight and I'm going to add weight. So I want to bring it down into the arm a bit more. All right. So I'm going to bring this into this and I'll bring this into this. Right. So now I'm introducing more, right, twist into the arm. I'm changing the character, if you will, of the twist. So as I come through here now, it's going down more into the arm, right? But I didn't affect my up and down at all.
Yeah, you got some pretty cool stuff happening in that deformer under the hood to do all this that you normally would have to try to figure out and build into your rig components themselves to do all that.
It just comes along with the Ozone joint solver. And we're working on an update to this. We're calling it this Joint Solver 2.0. And you'll be able to have separate weights for translate, for scale, in each axis, along with twist. So now when you do stretchy limbs, you'll be able to have a different weight for translating the joint, then rotating the joint, then twisting the joint.
That's
same thing with scale. So you can build in squash and stretch, again, with two joints. And be able to look at just the distance between the two joints. And as they change the weight.
That's crazy. Cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see that. That's nuts.
Yeah, fun stuff. Okay, so last thing, and we'll look at just this. So let's take hide the joints. And we talked a little bit about this before. Let's do mouth, and I'll do avars, and let's do main, right? So here I have my mouth that I can move up and down, right? And let's just do our weights. And we'll do UD, right? Here is my mouth UD, right? You'll notice I have a positive and a negative weight map, right?
Okay,
well, what this means is when I move this in the positive direction, I have a weight map for that. When I move it in the negative direction, I have a weight map for that. So let's say you've built this whole thing out and you go, hey, I want to tug the nose more when the mouth goes down. Well, I hit my negative weight and, right? And now I can go like this. So we come here, right? I'm going to grab my mung. I'm going to mung this weight down a little bit more. We go here, right? I'm going to add this a little bit more. Let's say I wanted to stretch. Well, let's not drag through because hold on. I don't want to select weights on his head. Right? So now I'm going to pull this out and then let's go ahead and just smooth these guys. Smooth them and I'll mung them, come through here. So now when I move it in the negative, right, it's moving those points more, but it doesn't move when I go up.
That's cool.
Right? I'm being pretty exaggerated here, but but let's go here and I'll smooth it. So it's a little bit better. Remember, it's all live, right? So you can keep tuning it down. And let's say you realize, oh man, I'm moving it too much. So we'll go here. I want to grab these guys and I'm going to do a smooth. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, well, 0.8. I'm going to multiply these guys off. Again, you can do this all while you're watching it. And that feels a lot more natural. And then I go into like this, and this is funny. You go, oh man, I'd never move the mouth like that. But what you can do now is come into here and go, I'm going to add a little tiny bit.
Yeah. Sometimes when you blow stuff out of proportion like that, you could really
big time, right? And you can say,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to pull this to here. I'm going to pull this to here. I'm going to grab these guys. And again, you're modeling with deformers. I can come in here and just add a tiny bit of movement.
Yeah, just like the level of art direction you could get.
That's right. I'm going to mirror these guys over. And now when I move it, right, you're see the little tug there? Mm-hmm. Instantly the surface comes alive. And because you can broaden the effect out and not break everything else around you, now when you start creating characters, every point on the face is going to move. Every single pose.
Yeah, you don't have any dead spots. A lot of times people author a face. There's like a lot of isolation. There's a lot of dead spots. With this, you get like this really fleshy feel.
And it doesn't require a sim. It doesn't require any of that stuff. It's just because of the way the system is designed. You get these things. They come along for the ride. So yeah, when we look at Ozone's system, right now I think we have 11 deformers. Now what's interesting is that, you think about your joint and blend shape system and you basically have 2, though 11 seems like not enough, in my opinion, but it's what we have right now. And let's see, we have a translate, we have rotate, we have scale, we have a joint solver, we have a bend, we have slide on curve, scale on curve, twist on curve, we have push along the normal. Did I say bend? And we do have a delta mush that's kind of out there, but it's not available.
Oh,
cool. But yeah, so that's the scope. Oh, blend shape. I was 11 blend shape. We do have a delta mush, but it's not exposed. So right, we have 11 deformers. Because each deformer can have its own weight map, the power or the control of what that deformer can do on your surface is a lot greater, right? You're not trying to fight against this web of joints. And because you can animate the weights, right? All of the weight maps you can have a projector that projects weights on there, and then you can dynamically change the weight map, on that one deformer. You now sort of have an infinite possibility. So even though we have 11 deformers, there's thousands of options with how you can use them. That doesn't require you to use a blend shape to get the point where you want, and that's actually a really big deal. I mentioned a few times, right? Like by flipping it on its head. So instead of it being, 80% blend shapes with 20% deformers joints, it's the other way, right? It's 80 to 90% deformers and 10% blend shapes. We call them sculpts, and what that allows you to do is put a lot more of the movement into spatial things that are much easier to reuse than specific modeling that really only works for the one asset you're in, right? If I model a cheek for one character, it's not going to do the same as the other.
Sure.
If I have a weighted translate, then I have a system that does the same thing in each place. I just have to have the weight map on it, right? And if I can't convert the weight map, I can add a new weight map and get the same very regular same behavior tuned together. So anyway,
I love how you described like the volumetric or projected weight maps. So you could have like almost like a procedural weight map that you can move around or have your geometry move through it. That seems really cool, especially for like lips and eyes.
Yeah, man, you can rig a lip and get it moving in like 5 minutes. Because it's all the behaviors built into that component that we call a module.
Right.
And if you take the curve and say, hey, I'm going to set, this is my 0, this is my 1, and you just say, this is my upper lip and this is my lower lip, all the lip line is done. It's going to do everything that the dynamic weights have been designed to do. Now it's not magic. You still have to come in there, and if you want the ooh shape to be different than the up and down shape and all that, you would weight those things differently. But you're going to find, and you'll get it. I'll put it in your hands, that you'll be able to rig a face in a much quicker, just so much faster than your traditional way of doing things. It's just faster. And then, you still have to be an artist, right? You're still going to make shapes and deal with feeling shapes. You're going to deal with combinations of things that you have to work through. It's not, there's no free lunch. It just makes that process a lot easier. So if we can get you to 80% like that, and often in a lot of production, 80% is enough.
Do you remember the old like the old modeling methods of like box modeling or like,
oh, dude, I grew up in that.
Right. So you have that. So I just remember being so constrained by trying to plan out topology while you're trying to model at the same time. Whereas now you have ZBrush where you could just kind of model exactly what you want and worry about the topology later. You're not hindered by this technical obstacle where you're trying to create something. So I kind of feel like this is something similar where it's like, we're not.
Interesting. I never thought of it like that, but you're not wrong. What's interesting about that from a practical standpoint is because we have subdivs and you can do subdivs in Engine, it's like there's this lost art because everybody's gone, to your point, everybody's gone to ZBrush. I'm like, I can just make whatever shape I want. Then retopology becomes something that's, it's not always smart subdiv retopology. It's just, I'm making a lower res cage.
Right.
So there's sort of a lost art to building. And when you're box modeling, it just, that's the way it works. Like you end up with a subdiv ready mesh from that method. So I find it kind of interesting that we're sort of on the other side, which is you have to get it to where box modeling would have taken you when you use ZBrush. I mean, it's definitely easier to go from ZBrush to the sparse cage than the other way around. I'm not saying go back to the old days,
right?
But that is something, you know, we've engaged with a few studios where they were like, well, we're all like, it's too low res. And I'm like, it's subdivs. It's not too low res. And they're like, well, like you see him kind of going, like, yeah, you're not going to have to manage all those vertices by hand anymore. If you get perfectly smooth results, but a much, far fewer control points.
Sure. And just the weight files, the file size, all that stuff.
All of it.
Yeah. They get really huge when you're dealing with a really dense mesh.
Yeah. It's different. And we're going to do an entire, we're already working on it. We're doing an entire training. What are we going to call it? It's a course. We're doing like a rigging course on ozone3d.com, and you're going to be able to, we're going to walk through all of this stuff. So not only how do you make a rig, how do you use a rig and all that, but like what are good topology standards? Rigging with subds in mind so that people can look at this stuff and learn and see it all in practice and not have to try to be fumbling around trying to figure it out. And I don't mean that as a derogatory at all. It's just that when you're not used to it, you don't know how to think that way. Once you open your minds up and you start thinking that way, you go, oh, right, this is better. And then like anything, there's always edge cases and gotchas and things you have to know about. But yeah, we're going to, when you become part of the Ozone community, right? You're not just getting the software, you're getting the software, you're getting the rigs, and you're going to get all the training and expertise. We're going to download all of that to you so that you can make great characters. You know what I mean? Like it's not just, hey, great, we got fast deformers, woohoo, and it's not just here are the rigs and know how to use them. It's going to be, how do you do all of that? And what are some best practices? How do you actually put all these pieces together to deliver a character on a deadline with the quality that you want and be able to hit the notes that you've been given, right? We're going to go through all of it.
That's super valuable. I mean, you'd be surprised. I'm sure there's a lot of software suites out there. When you go to use them, there's like minimal documentation, and then there's barely anything online. Maybe you have to pay somebody like $1,000 for a special course to kind of get the real production methods for using that. Like I know like Ziva Dynamics was kind of one of those where there are some kind of third-party courses on how this is actually used in production versus like the little 2-minute low quality.
Do you want to see the training map that we've built?
Yeah, let's see it.
Here, let me cue it up here. So this, share my screen.
Okay, let me get your screen share plugged in too.
Okay.
I'll let you know when I'm ready.
Okay. Should I share the screen or wait?
Oh yeah, go ahead and share it, and then I'll let you know when I got it plugged in. Okay, cool. Hang on one sec. Okay, good to go.
Yeah, so this is our training plan. It's not done. We're going to continue to work on this and fill it out and tune it. But the idea is that each one of these, let's zoom into, let's say technical, right? each one of these headings is going to be a training page with a video and or documentation about this idea. So, for instance, if we think about elements, right? What are core technical ideas, right? These are how Ozone thinks about certain things. Collections, here are the different rigs. You've got components, you've got modules, you've got rigs and assets. And we're going to go through each one of these, right? So talking about a rotate, single versus multi-axis, we're going to literally have training on each one of these pieces from a technical point of view, right? So different platforms, Maya, Moto, Unreal, Python, all the elements that are related to Ozone that are on these platforms from a technical point of view. Core technical concepts, right? And each one of these is going to be a video you can watch. And then if you think artistic, right, there's theory, there's the process of using these modules, assets, puppet rigging, the actual rigging process itself, weighting, fitting, sculpting, full length tutorials, workflow tutorials. Performance is going to be animators. So we're going to bring some really, really amazing animators on board to show you how they will use these rigs to create performances. Talk about the things that they see all the time. Seminars, this is filled out, but the idea of, honestly, this video could be that we're working on together could be something that people could look at and I could link to here.
Sure.
So, pipeline, thinking about Ozone in a virtual production pipeline, traditional gaming, different disciplines, reference guides, looking at, Avar shapes. When I move my mouth in certain directions, what shapes should I get? What do I want to see out of this rig component to get the results that I expect? And then, of course, there'll be onboarding, which is for new studios and new users to be able to quickly get started. And you'll see these little gray arrows. That means that this video is actually going to be in multiple places in the training. I don't have to build it twice. It'll be instanced inside the training. But yeah, this is not done. But this is basically an entire rigging course with Ozone as the center. And we're already starting to record these things. So hopefully by the summer, this will be completely fleshed out. So as a user, a student, a studio, you'll be able to come in here, and not that we won't be there to help. We will always be there. But you won't need us for every little question. You'll be able to go and give it a shot, find something you're looking for, and then move from there. So,
super valuable. Yeah, that's really cool. What's the timeline looking like for Ozone kind of official release or?
So right now, we're in pre-release basically. So we have a couple of studio partners that we've been working with that are helping us kick the tires, stress test things. And hopefully we will be at what we're considering a GA, a general release, by January. But we're going to be ramping up. So we're already talking to studios right now about taking where we are right now, starting the training process, getting them going and moving on. So, studios that are interested in using Ozone can feel free to reach out to us right now. We're being picky about who we work with right now. Mm-hmm. Basically just because the product's not complete. And we want to make sure that they have the right kind of technical expertise internally to be able to work with something that's not done yet, and get the most out of it. Otherwise it becomes frustrating for everybody.
Sure.
But if I had to put an actual date on it, general release is probably GDC next year, like March. We'll be at general release by January is my guess, but we're also going to want to make sure we're finished on training, that we've buttoned everything up, that we've done all the bug fixing and everything else for that. And it'll be Maya and Unreal will be our target out of the gate. And then from there, we'll work on other platforms, depending on what the market needs. If you made me guess, it's a toss up between Unity and Houdini.
Yep.
So it just depends on who's gonna push more, the VFX / virtual production guys or the game people. But yeah, that's where we are. So not to be cagey, but beginning of the year.
Right.
And
that's awesome.
We're working with studios first before we work with individuals, mainly because of the support effort and needing to be able to really give our time to people. But at some point, and my guess is by the summer, individuals will get access to things if they want to buy a license as an individual. But that one's more up in the air. I'm not sure when. It really comes down to the way our licensing works. It's a site license. I won't talk about price here. If someone's curious, go to ozone3d.com and we can talk about it. But it's a site license, right? So a studio gets, a number of seats that covers them for a price, and they get everything that we build. So it's not, it's like if you get the Ozone license, you get everything.
That's cool.
And individuals will be the same way. If you get a single seat, you'll get all the training, you'll get all the rigs, you'll get all the beds. And we do want to engage with educational places, universities and things like that, and as well as students. Again, I want the training to be really, really solid, all filled out, so that a new student can kind of walk through the process. But this. You get students coming out of school, and they're like, "There's 100 animators. Let's say there's 100 people.
Yeah,
80 of them are animators, or let's say 60 of them are animators. You've got 30 modelers. You've got 2 shading TDs. Maybe 2 rigging TDs, a pipeline guy, and like the people who are doing rigging are only there because they want to animate, and so they tried to figure out rigging, and then everybody came to them because they couldn't do it.
Sure.
So often the rigging process is a real impediment for people in school because they don't really want to do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like we can create a system where, with a little bit of rigging knowledge, modelers and animators could be riggers. They can take these tools and these rigs and make their characters and just spend their time animating and not have to worry about the rigs. And then those special few, those unicorns like you and I, that'll come in and go,
really like it.
Oh, yeah. I love this stuff. And they want to figure out how to do it and build their own components and everything.
Yeah, I've often equated rigging in Maya as like going into Home Depot and saying, I want to build a car. Like, you could do it. And you could probably get pretty clever at it, but that's not the best way to do it. And I kind of feel like the Ozone 3D solution is more like, hey, we have purposely built parts and systems that work to make cars, and they're beautiful and they're fast and they don't weigh 1 billion pounds. And
we've done the engineering.
Really cool.
Just buy the parts and assemble it yourself.
It's
a great way of thinking about it.
That's awesome, man. I have some questions that are somewhat related, maybe more of like a kind of like a business standpoint. Like in my experience, I've had ideas like, I want to make an app or a tool that does X, Y, or Z, but I've never had gotten over that obstacle of being able to invest time and resources enough into it, like you have with Ozone. Like, how did you overcome that obstacle for yourself? Like, what do you have any advice for people that are
this
facing?
Is a big topic. I feel like we should pull out the bourbon. But so first of all, it's like you have to have the capital to be able to do it, right? Ultimately, there's no way to do this unless you are you're independently wealthy and you don't need a paycheck, or you're going to have resources or money to be able to do it.
Sure.
You certainly, when you're young enough, you can scrap it together and do it at night with your buddies. That happens.
Right.
I'm an old man with a family and a mortgage, so I couldn't do that.
Right.
So when I left Pixar, I was deciding what I wanted to do, and I hooked up with a very good friend of mine, Peter McGowan, who is the owner of Storyland Studios. They're in Corona, so I guess they're north of Orange County, northeast of LA, somewhere in there, but SoCal. And I was just kind of sharing ideas that I had, and the first one was actually on training. I was thinking I was going to leave Pixar and I was going to teach people how to think differently. And I don't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning of our interview. So he said, well, why don't we do something together? And so for me, what that did is Peter and his company's resources to be able to create. We started with Kite String, it turned into Ozone, but I got a paycheck, and he bankrolled it. His company.
Oh, that's cool.
Put the resources in there, and it's not just that Peter had resources. He's a really good guy, really smart businessman. And so for me, what it was is partnering with somebody who knew the things and were strong in the things that I was weak in, and like vision for what this needed to be. I got that. Knowing how to beta test and build rigs. Yeah, I got that. dealing with HR and payroll and taxes and all of the other things that you have to be good at to run a business. Not so much. So while it was just me at first, as we grew, and really there was this pivot when the training didn't really sell as well as we had hoped, because I was talking about concepts and ideas that nobody could actually use.
Sure.
There was no way to actually do it. So Ozone got its birth out of that, right? It was like, all right, we're going to, why don't we give people a way to think about these things differently? And so we created a prototype. And that prototype we were like, holy crap, this could change the way characters are made everywhere. For us, it was very obvious, like, oh, it's what? I'm getting a real-time, order of operation based deformers in engine, and it's running at 60 frames a second. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is real.
It's doable.
Right. And so at that point, that's when I talked to Peter, and I was like, we need to put more money into this and bring in people that can actually build it. If we're going to create a software company, we need people. And that's when we approached Eric Soldi, who we had just left Epic Games, and somebody I've known forever. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to retire. I'm going to make my own game. And I'm like, so I got this idea. And so he came and he built what is Ozone today. He built the engine. So I brought, a top-notch, top-level senior, software engineer that knew the space and understood what we're doing and built it. And then we have grown from there. And so that's when bringing like Jason Bickerstaff, buddy of mine that worked at Pixar, is an amazing character artist, Brian Tyndall and Jason Davies. And then on the engineering side, got Clifford Champion, who's worked at Z Space and is an amazing engineer. Lonnie, Scotty Sharp, right? We get these really amazing engineers, and I was able to bring them in. And we also did a funding round. So Peter, self-funded us for a period of time. Then we got investment. That was about 18 months ago. And we're actually in another round right now. We're looking to do another raise so we can go even faster.
That's awesome.
So it's it's not, everybody's path is different.
Sure.
But if you can do it as a side project, then you can do that. But something of this kind of scale is really hard to do that way. And it's really hard to do it by yourself. So having a real company that's capitalized to do so, and not that it's been easy. We just recently, about a year ago, we brought in Robin Riley, and she's just been promoted to our CEO, and she's outstanding. And she is an operations like superstar, right? So we have somebody that just knows how to wrangle the cats, knows how to talk to the cats, knows how to build a system of efficiently getting work done. And like
so.
Proper.
Does she have experience in CG or anything, or what's
not
her
CG?
background?
No, not CG. So she helped run, and she's going to beat me up for it because I don't remember all the names of the things. But she worked for a telecom company, and she was running a $500 million division at a cell phone company and managed that whole thing. And then she went to work for Mariners Church and worked in that and managed that. It was a really big organization and something that's kind of her passion. But thousands of people, right, managing these things. And then she decided to come back to California to be with her grandbaby. And that's when Peter and her are friends. And he's like, hey, what do you think about playing around with a startup? And she came on board, and it was really clear, man, like she's a rock star about that. And that, I would say that the biggest thing I would offer to your listeners, if you want to start a company, is figure out your weaknesses as soon as you can. Like, what do you need other people to be like? Where do you need other people to be involved? Don't be greedy. Peter paid for it all. So he was very generous, and I got a small piece of the ownership of the company. But just because it was my idea doesn't mean I get the majority of the ownership.
Sure.
He who pays,
Right.
and so like understanding, it's like he was incredibly generous to me for because I had no risk. I was getting a paycheck and I got ownership, right? So find the right kind of ownership structure that works, and be honest about where you aren't strong, right? And one of the things that's worked well for us is we have sort of an internal saying that the best idea has to win. Well, that means you got to be willing to say this person has a better idea than you. You got to check your ego at the door, right? Now, it doesn't mean you don't have leaders in leadership that have to make decisions and go for it. That's how it works. But you got to listen, and when the quiet person in the room speaks, you'd be a fool not to listen to what they have to say. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do it. But you
sure.
damn well better listen. And so, yeah, it's, I feel like I'm, sharing like haikus or whatever, but
I personally love this stuff. This is, I love the rigging stuff. I'm also very much interested in, someone like yourself who's built something from the ground up, a regular guy from the industry. How do you go from A to B? Like that's really cool to me. So to hear
it's hard.
The thought process and
building, you got to build a team. Relationships are important. When I first got my start, and I remember my first cigarette was 94.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into a talk, and I was a lightwave guy, so I was getting started and stuff. And I went to this talk, and I was on fire for this stuff. I was like, I got the video toaster, and I'm got lightwave, and my 10,000 floppies, and I'm figuring stuff out. And so I went to this thing, and I asked these questions, and I was like, really specific questions because I had been getting into it. And the guy at the talk, he's like, yeah, I can't tell you that. I'm like, what do you mean you can't tell me that? He's like, yeah, but that's my secret sauce. If I tell you that, then you'll compete against me and whatever.
That's insane.
What, right? So I thought about that from that moment 30 years ago now. I have never not shared anything with anybody.
That's cool, man.
Right? I'm paying it forward. If the intern needs help, I'm going to help the intern. The intern might be my boss someday. And there are everybody around you might be better than you, but it always pays off to be around people that are smarter than you and better than you and help them as much as you can. Because when you do that, it always comes back to you. And if you hold on to your little fiefdom and you try to if you get protectionist,
it
almost always puts you in a worse position, at least in my opinion. And so I think that attitude, I hope, paid off. So when it was time to do this, I had a lot of people in the industry that I knew, that I trusted, that trusted me. And there was a lot of personal capital that was expended to go, hey, I can't pay you what you're worth right now, but we're trying. You want to come on the run? You want to jump on with the merry band of pirates, and we're going to go storm the seven seas, And I had a lot of people that were willing to come on board.
That's killer.
And I've got to imagine that treating everybody with respect and equally through, it doesn't mean there weren't some jerks I worked with, but that has paid off now. So it's, it's all of it. I also am married to an amazing lady, Kelly. I've got 2 kids, Parker and Sydney Kate, and they are incredibly supportive of their workaholics husband/father. So if anybody has helped me through this, my wife is a huge, huge thing. We got married in 2000, so it's been 24 years now.
Congrats, man. That's cool.
So it takes all of those things.
Do you handle stress well, or are you up at night like obsessing about things or letting things?
I would be a liar if I didn't say things stressed me out.
Sure.
But I will say that typically I handle stress better than average. At some point you just have to, my father told me something a long time ago, not easy advice to take, but he's like, if you can't do anything about it, don't worry about it. Right?
But the thing.
Yeah, right. As a teenager, you go, if you can't actually do anything about it, you can't change the outcome or affect the outcome, then don't worry about it because there's nothing you can do. It's so easy to say, so hard to do. I get it. But generally, I'm kind of a happy-go-lucky guy. Most times I'm excited about the things that I'm working on. So stress I have an easier time of it. It doesn't mean that we haven't had some really, really stressful times in this process where I went, I'm laying in bed and staring at the ceiling going, what the heck are we going to do? Or working my ass off so hard that I'm falling apart. So there have been those moments.
For sure. But especially when you have investor money or you're like, there's this, I would imagine there's pressure that comes with that. Hey,
it is a responsibility. It's a weight.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny.
A weight.
It's more than stress. It's just a weight. Like I feel personally responsible for everybody on our team. I mean, now we've got 20 people on the team, like 14 internal, and we've got some, we've got like fractional CFOs and things like that. But I feel like their lives, their families, everything. Not that they're all so talented; they'll go get other jobs. But
for sure,
but there's a sense of weight, responsibility to make sure that these people are taken care of and their families are taken care of. And of course, there's the investors who put money in it. The investment group. I feel incredibly responsible for delivering a product that makes money and generates revenue and honors their commitment. And startups are hard. We thought we were going to be done with where we are right about now. I thought we would be in February.
Wow.
So there, it tries the patience of an investor that put money in and expected results. And, this year we didn't hit what we had projected. Now, not out of malice or anything, just software production is hard.
Yeah.
This whole idea, like every little thing, it's just not easy. And certainly with Peter, being a very good friend of mine, and the amount of effort and his personal resources that he's put into this, I feel an incredible weight of responsibility. But it's not the kind of stress that kills me. When things go bad, I'll give myself 24 hours to feel sorry for myself and then get back to it. Right.
Right.
All right. I'm gonna whine and complain about this today, and then tomorrow I'm gonna move forward and we're gonna do what we have to do. What's the old? It's either Churchill or one of the World War II leaders. Like, if you're going through hell, keep going. Don't stop there. Keep going.
Brilliant advice. For sure.
Yeah. Again, there's lots of things that are easy to say. Like, hey, you want to get in shape? Just eat less and move more. Sure.
Done.
But ultimately, when it comes to it's like investing. I've only ever invested in things that I personally thought I would use or that I believe. Right. And that doesn't mean I had 100% success there either. When it comes to a company, don't do it to make money. You have to do something you believe in that then could make money.
Sure.
Because it's too hard. It's too hard to do something that was just for the dollar.
And I feel like that comes probably a lot later too. It's not like there's any immediate,
No, man. There's a million
reward.
Overnight successes that took 10 years to get there, right? We've been doing this. It'll be 6 years in December.
Right.
6 years, and we're still getting to a 1.0 baseline product. Now, we weren't working on Ozone for that whole time.
Sure.
Kite string and doing the training was a big part of it. So we've only been really doing the Ozone thing for about 24 months full time, really going after it. So,
but to get to that point,
there's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of work to get there. So, yeah, man.
Dude, I love all that stuff. Rich, it's been awesome having you on the show. I can't wait to show everybody the tech. I think it's going to be really transformative for the industry once all this kind of gets online. And I've really enjoyed talking to you, man. I look forward to
you too, man. I appreciate you having me on. And for anybody that's interested, I will be at Unreal Fest. It's October 1st through the 3rd, and October 3rd at 2 p.m. is the Ozone talk. And so I'm going to be showing off some fun stuff there. And if you can't make it to the show, I believe it'll be put up online afterwards.
Killer. That's awesome. I might try to sneak out there, but I don't know if that's going to work out.
Dude, you're invited. Whiskey on me if you get out there.
All right, man.